everybody. This is Darren Dunlap with the Fargo Moorhead West Fargo Chamber. And we are really excited today to be joined by Kevin Buchholz, who is the president of Moore Engineering. Many of you may not know, but Moore Engineering had reached a milestone this fall. They celebrated 60 years in business. Now, Kevin, I know there's no way that you've been around for 60 years, but I was at the ribbon cutting, and you seem to say that you'd been there a little bit over half of that time. But so first of all, congratulations on 60 years.
Well, thank you, Darren. Appreciate the kind words. And yes, we got to celebrate a birthday of 60 years. And to date myself, yes, I've been here for 32 years of those 60 years. So it seemed to fly by, but there was others here that would say I've been here too long. But needless to say, it's been a great run and a great time to be part of Moore Engineering. So excited to be here and talk to you.
Great. Well, thank you. You know, one of the things that really stood out to me when we had your ribbon cutting was that you mentioned the fact that Moore Engineering has served as the city engineer for the city of West Fargo for, for many decades. And I guess the first thing that I wanted to touch base with you on is, if you've been the city engineers for West Fargo, you have seen some incredible growth in the city of West Fargo. And I guess I'd really like you to touch on that right away.
Okay. Well, thanks, Darren. To clarify exactly that, yes, we started in 1960, Kip and Marshall Moore. But Kip was actually appointed the city engineer for West Fargo in 1962. So to answer your question, that's 58 years that our firm, or someone from our firm, has been the city engineer for West Fargo. To your point, we've been part of an amazing ride with this community, and our growth and our success has mirrored and been part of and influenced by the city of West Fargo and their growth. To give you some perspective, Darren, when Kip moved here in 1960, there was about 3,500 people in the city of West Fargo. And for the people in Fargo and don't realize this, there were actually farm fields between West Fargo's and the interstate. There was no West Acres. There was nothing west of the interstate between Fargo and West Fargo. And then I personally took over as the city engineer in 1992. And in basically, I would say about 95 or so, the population was about 15,000 people, 13,000 to 15,000. And now to date, there's 35,000. So we've seen an explosion in the community, a transformation from a very small little rural community into a bustling community.
Kevin, one of the things you touched on was the Cheyenne River diversion. So I did want to touch base on that a little bit more. Now that started in 92. Was that about the time you took over in West Fargo?
Yes. So yes. So Darren, I was lucky enough to get some blame and some credit for building that project. The blame was when it was first built, the cost and the expense. And then by 97, there was like, wow, this thing really works. And so all of a sudden, you got the credit and the blame along there. But I want to back up a little bit. The story of the diversion in West Fargo isn't much different than the projects that go on today. That spooled up out of significant flooding in West Fargo in the 60s and 70s. In fact, in 1969, there was major flooding in West Fargo where there were homes that the dikes were on the front of their homes and they were flooded from the riverside because the whole town was in peril of being flooded. You'll still see remnants of dikes in the backyards of almost every home in West Fargo along the Cheyenne River. So in 69 and 75 were significant floods. And then I got to give credit to the business leaders in the community back then, the Wally Tintuses and the Bernie Dartises, the city leaders, i.e. the Florence Bjornsons and the Clayton Ladones, who took the challenge and the lead to start looking at projects, getting it engaged, then coupled that with the local water resource districts. And you start looking at the state officials that, to your point, a project got built in 92, but it started with its infancy in the 70s and early 80s. And again, I would say Kip Moore and Jeff Volk from our office, along with Dick Twitchell, were instrumental in helping them put these kind of projects together to get it go forward. And yes, so in 92, the project wasn't even completed and the first summer flood came and it was required to be used. And I will tell you, the next 20 years, the diversion operated 19 times for a project that was only supposed to be used once every 20 years. That wet cycle kicked in. And I would tell you today, had it not been for the West Fargo and the Horace diversion, I don't know that a good part of West Fargo would even be here today after 97 or 2010. Some of those significant floods. Again, you got to look at the vision of those leaders, the challenge to take on a hard issue and to get it built has been a legacy changing impact to the city of West Fargo and to the surrounding area, that it's one of those projects that changes the destiny of a community significantly.
Kevin, I guess I would ask you, with the diversion that was built in 92, and then with the opportunity to maybe get parts of West Fargo and maybe significant parts of West Fargo out of the floodplain, how has that really played into the hand of the residential growth, the growth of explosion, I guess, of West Fargo?
Well, Darren, you're spot on. The explosion occurred in two factors. Basically, the economy kicked in, but also it was the only place that was high and dry in the metropolitan area. Prior to 92, or prior to the diversion, almost all of West Fargo was in the floodplain. To put that in perspective, people had to pay flood insurance, which was hundreds of dollars a year, upwards even to a couple $1,000s a year. But from a practical standpoint, you can drive around West Fargo today and you can find homes that were built in the 70s and 80s. And literally the first floors of those are 7 to 8 feet above the existing ground, because that's where they built to get out above the floodplain. So it was almost down to no homes built, 0 homes being built in the mid 80s in West Fargo. That after the diversion, the floodplain was eliminated, no flood insurance was required. Then after the 97 flood was really when the practical side kicked in, when, unfortunately, South Fargo and areas were significant flooding areas, and West Fargo was literally dry and protected. And that's when the explosion went. So to give you numbers, I can tell you exactly, there was 15,000 people in 2000. And that's when it exploded over the next 20 years. We got 35,000 people now in 2020. So literally 20,000, this community more than doubled in those 15 to 20 years. And that is basically because it was high and dry. Our region, and here again, it isn't that all these jobs were created in West Fargo, but our region needed that kind of a housing stock or that market, Darren. And West Fargo was literally the only place that was dry and out of the floodplain. And I don't want to be so critical that it was a knock against Moorhead or Fargo. It just, there was that opportunity and that availability, and that's what played its part. And yes, West Fargo was the fastest growing community from 2000 to 2015, year after year.
Very interesting. Yes, and I've been here for 40 years, and I do remember those fields in between Fargo and West Fargo. And I also remember significant amount of fields between West Fargo and Horace not that long ago. I think there's a lot of people who can remember that. So obviously the growth has been unbelievable, but also the growth of more engineering. And Kevin, one of the things that I guess I knew it, but I didn't realize the impact that the move that was 20 plus years ago, that more engineering went to become an ESOP. And I know that at the ribbon cutting, you had talked about the importance of that, and I'd really like to hear you speak on that, please.
Well, again, I look to some of our original partners that had the vision and had the wherewithal to look at how do you make a community, i.e. a business, a family of employees, have the sustainability. And so the original partners, when I got to be the last one, Kip was looking at retiring, we brought up this statement called an ESOP, which was at the time, employee ownership was not that prevalent in this part of the United States or in the Valley here. I think there were only 2 other ESOPs in the Fargo-Moorhead area at that time. And Kip suggested that. I would look to my other partners at that time that said, okay, let's look into this. What's the advantages, disadvantages? We looked about how this would impact the culture, but the key thing was that we saw an importance that more engineering would keep a local ownership and presence in here and how to continue that for generations. Because we value our relationships and our impacts with our clients in the communities that we work with. And so we looked at the ESOP was a way of continuing that ownership from a local standpoint, giving that stability to the company. And so we started in 1998 with 50% of our company going into an ESOP. And after a few years of working at it and understanding it and seeing it, we saw a significant change in our culture where this employee ownership was important to all of our employees. It wasn't just a handful of people, and that they could have an impact on their lives in the decisions they made, and the impacts we have with our clients would also impact our family of employees. And so in 2004, we went 100% ESOP. And we pride ourselves in creating a workforce that's stable, a family environment. When I say family, we have our trials and tribulations like any family does, but on the same token, we stick together when times get tough. So I would say at More Engineering, we have countless, in fact, we have most of our employees have started work with here right out of college and have stayed here their entire lives. To your point, Kurt Lisney, who's our office manager now in West Fargo, came here as I believe it was a sophomore in college on a part-time internship on a survey crew, and has only worked at More Engineering. And, he is full in every intention that he's going to retire from here. Jeff Volk, who was our previous president, CEO of More Engineering, came here right out of NDSU and has 42 years as an employee and never worked anywhere else. So yes, it is unique. And I think what makes us special in that we have this loyalty, we have this commitment that people come here and stay here for the right reasons. And that really helps us to be able to deliver better products to our clients and to our customers. When you have that stability, you have that leadership, that engagement. So yes, we don't brag about it a lot because engineers, for the most part, we kind of are even keel, kind of middle of the road kind of a people. But that is something that we should be proud of, that we've got an environment and a culture that people come here and basically want to ultimately retire out of here because they enjoy what they're doing.
Well, congratulations on that. One of the other things that really stood out to me, Kevin, was you had mentioned that More Engineering has been involved in over 20,000 individual projects, for a bunch of different communities around our region. So obviously, you're not just working in West Fargo on civil and water resource engineering programs. So I guess I'd really like to hear a little bit more about some of the other communities and some of the other areas that More specializes in.
Well, again, Darren, we started out and primarily we were a Valley firm for the first 30 years of our existence, primarily the Red River Valley. More is broke into, we're a civil engineering firm, and people ask, what is that, Darren? Well, we do municipalities. We're the city engineers for, I believe, about 150 communities throughout North Dakota and the northern half of Minnesota. Today, we have 7 offices spread out from West Fargo here to Bismarck, Williston, Minot. We also then have offices in Fergus Falls, St. Cloud, and Bemidji, Minnesota. So our footprint has grown tremendously from just being a Valley firm out into serving this entire region. Our mission is to improve lives by building stronger communities. And so we've really broken down our services into being a civil firm, but municipal work is a key component of it, but we also do water resources, which, as you echoed, is the flood projects and drainage projects and things of that nature, floodplain work, modeling of watersheds. Then as we've branched into transportation, where we're working for the DOTs and the highway departments and things of that nature. We also do a significant amount of wastewater work, where that's into the water plants and wastewater plants. And then along with that, we do a significant amount of environmental work in today's world on permitting and engagement of getting projects through all of the hurdles and the impacts that we have that projects today. There's, out of those 20,000 projects, there's always been impacts along with providing a benefit out of the projects, and how do you mitigate those? And the last part that we've prided ourselves from day one is doing survey work. So to answer your question, yeah, our footprint has grown from this local impact in I would say an 80, 90 mile radius of Fargo Moorhead, to now we reach out through all of North Dakota and basically 2/3 of Minnesota, of which then we still are delivering the same goals and values and objectives from day one, but now we're doing it to a much broader market, and in which then again there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of roads for us ahead to get down and get through. So
yeah, it's just unbelievable, the growth that we've seen and what is going to be coming. So that's where I'm going to go with our final question here, Kevin, as we wrap up. I always like to ask people to take a look into their crystal ball and give us an idea, with the growth that you've seen in West Fargo. So I was trying to do some quick math. So from the year 2000 to 2020, it's been 20,000 or 20,000 increase in population. Even a slow guy like me can figure out that's 1,000 people per year moving into the municipality of West Fargo. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, what do you feel is the future growth for West Fargo? And with the Red River Diversion going to be going in, I guess, your ideas about growth in our region. But more importantly for our conversation, where do you see the growth of more engineering going forward?
Oh, well, that's easy questions, crystal balling, Darren. Does anybody have the answers with a crystal ball? But
I think engineers always have the answers, right?
There we go. Well, we think we do, or else we'll get a spreadsheet where we can create the answer. I know that. So to answer your question, Darren, I think, I would reflect even this year with the COVID and the challenges that we've had. I think you're going to see more and more people moving to the rural parts of our country. And we've proven to ourselves now that from technology-wise and from a capability standpoint, we can deliver remotely. We can deliver to a lot of sectors and areas within our economies and within our world today. So to get to more of a granular thing, I do believe there's going to be a continual influx of people into the Fargo Moorhead, into greater North Dakota, greater Minnesota, because of that rural environment. And because we can do it remotely, people are going to be looking for that work-life balance in that space and that sort of thing. So I look at our region is going to continue to grow. Now, you kind of went into more of a practical standpoint with the diversion and actually the geographical side of it. The diversion is clearly going to give more confidence to the area that the businesses, in the terms of protecting your assets and investing into your properties and buildings that that are going to be protected, is key to a lot of businesses for their stability and their growth, ours included. But I will look at that, and geographically, the diversion is going to open up space to be developed, which I know is an argumentative debate of what's the purpose of it and why. First and foremost, it's to protect the assets that are here and the people that are here on life, health, and property. So the diversion, though, does have a side benefit of which will create space for more growth. I also see that it doesn't necessarily need that space, because people are learning how to grow more vertically, if you look at the downtown Fargos and the downtown West Fargos, that there is a cultural change that people are comfortable moving into more density where they have more options, more availabilities for entertainment and for a social life and social aspects. So the diversion is going to bring that much more, I think, economic stimulus to our metropolitan area, which then there's a definitive need for infrastructure for the water, the wastewater, the transportation, the services that we need to survive and to expand. So, that's going to continue. And to your point, I think the diversion around the Fargo-Moorhead area in West Fargo, it is a cultural hub that has an impact that's probably upwards of a couple 100 miles of just the Fargo-Moorhead. It definitely within a 100-mile radius, it is an economic driver and generator for this entire Red River Valley. And, it's no different than the Wahpetons that have the flood protection and the Grand Forkses that have the flood protection. You need that security and that stability for that growth. So now if you want to drill it down into more engineering is crystal ball, we started this expansion of our footprint over 20 years ago, and we went into Western North Dakota and into getting a little more branching into Minnesota. The last 10 years, we've made a greater push into central Minnesota and northern Minnesota. And so from our perspective, we're going to continue that growth of that expansion. Those regions, as I just echoed, have this influx of people, the need for infrastructure, the need for facilities and support for the economies for people to live, is that, we are any business that needs roads for transportation and delivery of goods. You need good, stable drinking water and treatment of it. You do need to protect and maintain the environment and the areas that we work and live in. So from our growth perspective, we see a lot of positives. And also, to your point earlier, Darren, we have a lot of great people like Kurt Lisney that you mentioned earlier, that we have the stability and the resources here to give them that opportunity to help expand their potential and their footprint to greater areas in the better part of Minnesota and continue our expansion in Western North Dakota. So,
Kevin, that's well, thank you very much for taking the time today. It was really, really enlightening, and it was so much fun to actually get out and see a ribbon cutting to do some celebrating. That's what our chamber does. We love celebrating our members, and it was wonderful to see the history that was all lined up during your ribbon cutting, having the people even Jeff Folk, that poor old guy that's 42 years he spent with you guys. He was even able to get up and say a few words. But in all seriousness, Kevin, congratulations to you and your Moore Engineering team on 60 years of incredible service in our region and our community, and especially to West Fargo. So on behalf of the Fargo-Moorhead, and today especially the West Fargo Chamber of Commerce, we want to say thank you, congratulations, and we can't wait to see what the next 60 years bring for Moore Engineering and our communities.
Well, thank you, Darren. We couldn't do it without the chamber as being a partner. We value our engagement. Every ounce of energy we've put into it, we've gotten a return of tenfold or better. And so it's a pleasure to be with people like you. We did do our social distancing on our ribbon cutting, but I still value the personal one-on-one relationships, because that, at the end of the day, is what it's really about, and how we can make our lives better and the people around us. So again, Darren, thank you, and have a great day.
All right. Thanks again, Kevin. We'll look forward to catching up soon.
Okay. Thanks, Darren.